the sky. There's a time for every people to affirm their destiny. La 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 la. Even so, all of us together can create a better land. Leave the past and new tomorrow. Wait for all who understand. La 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 la. Leave the past, a new tomorrow. Wait for all who understand.
Welcome everybody to this afternoon's discourse and class. It's my pleasure and it's an honor to be here in Chennai today with Nayaswami Jaya to be able to share these teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda with you. We have much to share and we have little time to do it, so that is going to necessitate, if you're interested in what we have to share today, it's going to necessitate for you to come back. And we have a center in Chennai, and also in the coming months we're going to have other acharyas from the Ananda Sangha who are coming to Chennai to share with you. And you can find out information about this at the back table back there if you're interested in what we have to offer today. I was scheduled to be here first it was in November, but you know what happened in November, and water came and I stayed home. And then we rescheduled for December. Well, you know what happened in December as well. It was a repeat. And so here the third time we've finally been able to break through and here to share with you today. It was perhaps, let's see now, I have to calculate. It was in 1968, it was almost 50 years ago, that my life took a very sudden and dramatic shift in a different direction. I was a newly minted graduate from the University of California in Berkeley. It's out close to the San Francisco area, California. I had graduated, and suddenly, within months of that graduation, my life took a different direction. I came across this book, An Autobiography of a Yogi. And if some of you have read it, I saw you raise your hands, but some of you perhaps have not read it. And whatever we say today, if it has any spark of inspiration, any spark of recognition perhaps that you may have interest in, it's because of this book. This book changed my life, as it has changed the lives of many other people as well. Many famous personalities have been influenced by that book. Some of you even may have read recently how Steve Jobs, even in the world of business and industry and computers, have been influenced very significantly by that book. Well, so it was with me almost 50 years ago. I read that book, and all of a sudden my life switched, and within 3 weeks, my path crossed that of Swami Ananda, whose photo is there on the very end. Swamiji was a direct disciple. He passed on only 3 years ago. He was a direct disciple of Paramahansa Yogananda, and he had dedicated his life to sharing these teachings and these techniques that we're going to just be able to touch on very briefly today. But he spent his lifetime of over 65 years of his adult lifetime sharing these teachings around the world. And my path crossed his, and because of what and how I was touched by these teachings of Yogananda that I recognized that somehow deep in my soul in that book, I hitched my wagon, so to speak, to the star of Swami Kriyananda. I became his student and have been serving under his guidance ever since. Now that guidance brought me to India 10, 12 years ago, and so I've been here for a little while. And I'd like to share with you a little bit today about, a little bit on the philosophical side, you might say, and then Dhyanaji is going to then take my place here and then share you briefly some of the techniques that may interest you, and I suggest that you consider them and perhaps you'd like to practice them in a more deep way. I mentioned that I read that book, and I look back on my life and I think, why was it? What was it that touched me on that? And because I had recently graduated from the university, a very good university, by the way, in America, I was steeped in the attitudes of a Western scientist, perhaps, let's say. Somebody who had that materialistic, scientific materialistic outlook toward life. I had graduated, I was about to go forward with my job, career, finding what that would be. And there was a mindset in the back of my mind. I was convinced that what I was seeing before me was the reality. But yet, somehow, it was not satisfying to me, because I felt, is this it? Is this what life is? Is this what the world has had before me? And I had the longing in my soul that there must be something more. And by the time I read that book, when I read that book, I was so excited, because it showed within those few pages, few hundred pages, it showed me a vast potential that I had not known about, but yet somehow seemed very familiar to me, that there was much more, that this world itself was much more. And all of a sudden, I began to realize that, yes, I myself have a potential for something much more than what my normal course of action seemed to be directing me toward. And with that, a welling up of hope in the ability to fulfill that potential came within me. And I share that with you today because we too sometimes become hypnotized with this thought that what we see around us is the sum all and be all. But I think anybody with a little bit of discernment knows that there's much, much more. There's a greater potential in each one of us. There's a story that you perhaps have heard about the lion cub that lost its parents and was raised by sheep. The mother sheep took the little lion cub in and raised it. And the lion grew up on the savannah, in the pastures there, thinking it was a sheep. Bah, bah, and it ran with the other sheep. And it played with the other sheep and bounced like the other sheep. And it probably ate grass like the other sheep too. Bah, bah. And seeing this lion in the midst of a group of sheep, a passing by lion, adult lion, passing by, saw this. Noticed this lion standing in the middle of these sheep. Bah. And he went up, closer and closer and closer. And finally, he ran up to it, confronted the little lion, and said, "What are you doing?" And the lion said, "Oh, don't eat me, don't eat me, don't eat me." And the lion, the male lion, or the adult lion, took the lion by the scruff of its neck and took it to the local pond, there a clear pond, and put the lion over the water so they could look down, see his reflection in the water. And he says, "You're not a sheep, you're a lion." And he looked, and he looked, and lo and behold, he looked just like that adult lion right next to him, and he realized, "I'm a lion, I'm not a sheep." And with that, the adult lion took the lion, and the lion went off with the lion. He's not a sheep. And this is something that we grow up thinking that we're sheep, but we're not. We're lions. We're spiritual lions. But we have to realize that, and we have to, it has to be revealed to us. We seem to have been somehow hypnotized that what our potential is just to be, come to a full age, you go to school, you get married, you have a family, you die, and that's all there is to it. Had a good career perhaps, and maybe you did a few kind deeds along the way. But there's much more potential for us. Paramahansa Yogananda, he went to the United States, as was described by our host, to share these teachings that there's something much more that can be realized if you only knew and woke up. And this is the message of all of the great ones throughout the ages. They don't come, the great ones, the great saints of every tradition. They don't come to show us how great they are. Their sole purpose is to come and show us how great we can be. Not necessarily how we are, but they show us the potential of what we can be. And there was one time when Paramahansa Yogananda was on the stage. He would speak to thousands and thousands of people, biggest auditoriums in the cities, major cities. He was speaking to a crowd, I believe it was in Chicago, and he was saying, he says, you don't realize, and he pulled up his arm and he would pinch his arm like this. He says, you don't realize the power that is available to you. Why? In 1 gram of flesh, if you could convert that to energy, it would be enough to power the city of Chicago for a week. Now, he was saying this in the 1920s, but I think, actually, science has shown that that's actually true. That's actually true. There's enough power, and he was saying there is that power, but we lack the ability to access that power. We lack the ability to make available to ourselves the potential that is there for every one of us to convert to energy, perhaps, and that literally, but more importantly in our lives, to convert the potential that each of us have to be a true success. And this is something everyone here wants to be, and it's something all of us as souls need to be. We need to be successful. And naturally, you're thinking, I'm saying successful on the spiritual realm. And I am. But I'm not restricting it to that. We need to be successful in everything we do. If we're a businessman, you should be successful in that. If you're a musician, you should be the best musician you possibly can be. Artist, same thing. If you're an athlete, sportsman, you should be the very best sportsman you can be. Success is not limited strictly to the spiritual realm. Success should be accomplished in everything. And this was Yogananda's message as well. He went to America and he said, well, you understand that the Westerners, the Americans, are practical people, so you have to approach them in a practical way. But he said, yet, he admired that practicality. He says, we all must be practical. It's a good thing to be practical. We should bring the practicality of the material practicality of the West and combine it with the spiritual efficiency of the East, and then we'd have the best. And that's what, and you can see in society right now, that is actually what's happening. The world is no longer East and West. It's all one world. It's a one world coming together now. We don't think in those dichotomies so much anymore. But Yogananda brought that. And he said we need to be successful, because if you're not able to meet the needs of your daily needs of yourself and your family, you're not going to be spiritually successful. For our true mission in life, which is to know God, is to know our true higher self, if we don't want to use that word. To know our true self, you're not going to be able to do that if you can't put food on the table. So we need to be successful on all levels. I say that because sometimes people sometimes think, oh, they're unsuccessful with worldly affairs. So what am I going to do? I'm going to run off and be in the jungle and meditate. I can't meditate. It's this very same skills that allow us to be able to be spiritually successful first have to be perfected to be able to provide the daily needs of our lives. We have to be able to concentrate. We have to be able to be calm and centered in the midst of trials. We have to be able to open our heart to be able to embrace other people and love our family and others, and to be compassionate. These are all basic human skills. And this is what we gain if we begin to practice these teachings that the great ones have brought us in throughout all the ages. And this is what Yogananda brought when he came to the West, when he went to the West. And also this is what all the great ones bring, to show us how great and how we can unlock that potential with us. There's a very sad statement when you say, he had so much potential. And of course by that you mean he had lots of potential, but he did not fulfill it. As you say, you hear that about somebody. Such and such was a good batsman. He had so much potential, but he didn't do it. You see. Now we don't want to be like that. We want to realize that potential, and the great ones come to also not only point the way for us for the future and what our potential is, but then that would not in and of itself be enough. If also we agreed to that, and they did not also bring us the practical techniques and the practical tools for us to be able to realize that potential within ourselves. And that's what yoga is about. That's what really all spiritual traditions and religions, they not only give you a vision, but to be truly effective, it must be able to be put to practice in our daily lives. And this is what the great ones bring. This, of course, is what the gurus of this line brought. They brought practical techniques. And as many of you know, if you know something of these techniques, of these masters, they brought these techniques, which are known as Kriya Yoga, into the common knowledge. An ancient technique that had been somewhat discarded or overlooked is maybe the better word, overlooked, but they brought them back through these great masters and other saints also of this tradition. They brought them back into human consciousness, and now it's our duty and our pleasure and our responsibility to share that with everybody. I mentioned at the beginning that I had come to these teachings, recently graduated from college at that time. And I had you might say, the very common understanding, this would have been in the 1960s, 1970s, common understanding of life is how it was at that time, which I mentioned that I felt there was something missing. And that is, this world seems to be, the presentation that the scientists give us is that there's nothing more. This matter is the ultimate reality behind what we see here. That's what this world is really made of. To be able to aspire to something beyond that is purely something of imagination. But this isn't what the great saints over the ages have taught. And it's not, if we look at life itself and the flowering of human consciousness, we can see that there is a direction in life. There is when we say the word potential, it means that there's something available for us that we can only realize it. But yet, when I came out of school, that was seeming to be presented as a fallacy. That's just a religious fallacy. But let's look at life, and let's see if that's really so. Science has told us that this world has slowly evolved from the early stages of this very universe to gases, to stars, to the planets being evolved and forming, ultimately till life itself takes shape. And if we look at the evolution of life, we see that it culminates in the development of this human body that we've been given. This is said to be a and the highest, greatest gifts that we could have as souls, is to be given this body, this soul, to be able to work out our karma in this very body. And it's not something that comes easy, and that if we have been given this gift, it's something that we should cherish. And as part of cherishing that, we should try to realize that potential that is within us. If we look, what is it when we see mankind? We see that we uniquely, the human vehicle is unique in its ability to express consciousness. We're conscious. We're aware of ourselves. We have been given this gift of consciousness, as opposed to the animals, which really don't have an ability to make decisions and make choices. Yes, some a little bit they do, but we uniquely have been given this. And the great ones, the masters, have said, this is by no accident. You can see there's been a directional development and evolution toward higher and higher forms. Mankind uniquely has a nervous system. The nervous system and the nerves and the spine, and also the brain, which is part of that nervous system. We uniquely have a nervous system which allows us to experience higher states of consciousness, which is not available to the other animals. And this unique gift is our tool by which we can use to overcome all of the obstacles, that which prevents us from experiencing our divine freedom. Paramahansa Yogananda made a very interesting statement. He said, the divine, all of us are on the path, the spiritual path to divine enlightenment. And of course, all outward religion, that's the purpose of religion, that's the purpose of a spiritual path, is to be able to give us the tools to that. And so we worship outwardly, and we do many things outwardly to be able to put ourselves in attunement with the divine. He said, but the path to our freedom is in our very own nervous systems. To be able to awaken and develop that nervous system, the brain, to be able to express higher divine consciousness in this very body. And this is why we have been given. The great ones, Lahiri Mahashaya, who's here on the far right, said this is the only single purpose for this material physical body, is to be able to give the soul a vehicle to understand and realize its oneness and its unity with the divine. And because it's such a great gift, we have a responsibility to use that gift wisely. You can see in the, even in the physical brain itself, there is an evolutionary direction to the development of the brain. I have a very good doctor friend back in the United States, and he termed it this way. He said this very body is engineered for divinity. It's made in such a way, as opposed to any other life form, it's made to allow us to experience these higher states of consciousness. And you might think of the image that when I was speaking with somebody about this recently, there is in the scientific world, there's this debate. Does this physical world, does this create consciousness? What is consciousness? Is it just a function of the brain? Or is it something else? Is it independent of the brain? And this image came to mind of a television. If you were to go back 150 years, and if you were in the, let's say in the 1850s, if you were to show somebody a television at that time, a scientist, he'd be very curious. He'd look at that television and he would turn on the television and perhaps a program would come on. And he would then want to dissect the television and take it apart to find where the program was inside the television set. And he would take it apart and take it apart, and no matter how much he would investigate, he would not be able to find the program in the television set. And why was that? Because it doesn't exist in the physical television itself. The television is something that receives or perceives that program that comes to us, to it. And it's in the same way, this brain is something that perceives the programs that it is playing. Paramahansa Yogananda made a very interesting point about this. He said, thoughts, things that we think that we are creating in our own mind, the brain perceives them. It does not create them. Thoughts are universally rooted, not individually created. And the science of yoga, the science of spirituality itself, and the destiny of us as human beings is to learn to be able to perceive that which already exists and to be able to draw that to us. Not just merely to passively receive thoughts, but to actually draw that which we need. And this is what the science of yoga and meditation and the deeper teachings are about, is how do we receive and perceive that which already exists. It's beyond us. Now, where do these thoughts, and if we don't create these thoughts, where do they reside? And this is something that the teachings of yoga, and particularly clarified with Paramahansa Yogananda. He said there is a realm. We, as modern students of science, have come to understand. We're familiar with the world of consciousness. We're conscious of one another right now. We're seeing one another. But we also know that there's another realm as well, known as the subconscious. It's that realm of memories and that of habits and patterns in the mind. But the yogis say there is a third realm as well, and this is known as the realm of the superconscious. That realm of universal thought, that realm of universal joy, that universal cosmic experience that all of the saints attune themselves to. And it's from that realm that we draw down to ourselves thoughts, creativity, inspiration. And Paramahansa Yogananda said it's not just a matter of being passive, but we can draw to ourselves thoughts and realizations from that realm of the superconscious. There was one time somebody asked him, he was a reporter, or a fellow was asking him, he says, is inspiration under the control of your will? And he says, of course. He says, let me demonstrate. And he put his attention at the point between the eyebrows for a moment. And he says, write this poem down. And he wrote this very beautiful poem. And it was written down. And a little while later, this was published in a book of poems. And the reviewer in the New York Times, I believe it was, Review of Books, said, oh, it's such a beautiful book, and I want to quote one poem especially that stands out. And it was this one poem that Yogananda had just drew from the ether. He says, this is the realm that all the great ones throughout the ages, it's from that realm that inspiration comes. The Einsteins of this world, You know, when Einstein devised his law of relativity, he said he perceived it in a flash. I think he was on a walk with one of his mathematician friends, and he said he perceived it. He said, but then it took him almost 10 years to do the mathematics to be able to present it logically. But it first came in a divine perception. If you look, there's wonderful a book called about great composers, and some of the great composers in the West from the 19th century, they said yes, they heard the music in their minds, in their inspiration, but then the work was writing them down. Swami Kriyananda would say this: if you want to be successful in life, we must train ourselves to access that realm of the superconsciousness, and then we begin to draw that down into our lives, and it's from that realm that solutions to every problem will come. Lahiri Mahashaya, the famous disciple here of Lahiri Mahashaya, his role in disseminating these teachings was to take the teachings of Kriya Yoga and spread them out into the world. And he did this from Benares, where he lived. And he made a very interesting statement. He said, for every problem in your life, you can solve that problem through Kriya Yoga. Now, people don't understand, what did he mean by that? How can how can doing a pranayama technique solve all of my problems? And what it was, is he was saying by proper use of yogic technique, you can uplift your consciousness to be able to receive from that higher level of understanding of the superconscious mind. And you begin to draw that into you. And this is where the solutions lie. And this realm, and to be able to access this realm, is what the techniques to do this are what was brought by the great masters of this path, the Babaji, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Peshwar Paramahansa Ananda. They brought these techniques of Kriya to give us access to solutions to life's problems, to be able to be successful and apply those principles in our everyday life of family, job, education, and then to be prosperous in outwardly, but specifically also to be prosperous within ourselves. Swami Kriyananda was giving a lecture at one time, and somebody asked him, he was speaking about divine subjects, and there was a man in the audience who was an atheist. And the atheist asked him afterwards, he says, well, sir, this was a very wonderful lecture, but I'm an atheist, and what would you have to say to me? How would this apply to me? And Swami's answer was good, because it doesn't matter what our belief is. He said, why don't you think of the divine as your own highest potential? And that's what I ask of you. What is looking within yourself, what is your highest potential? Now, practically in the outward world, but also, what is it that you really want? Now, we want to be successful. We want to be materially successful. We want to be, the king wants his land and power, and all, everybody has something. And this is okay. This is okay. But you will find that to the degree that you attain your outward goals, some satisfaction comes from that, but you're never totally satisfied that way. There's always something more, because the potential is always, even the greatest king has a greater potential even yet, until we realize that outer things are not going to be our true satisfaction. We'll fulfill that potential, and so we begin to look inside for happiness, for joy, for those inner satisfactions that we really will fulfill. But nevertheless, that comes with your experience. All of us should be thinking, what is it that my own highest potential could be? And try to strive for that. What is holding you back? What is blocking you? from that. If you find that you cannot concentrate, there are techniques to help you do that. If you find that your guidance is poor, perhaps that's blocking you. You can improve your guidance. There are techniques for that as well. There's techniques for everything to be able to allow you to realize your own highest potential. For most people, you can find that simply removing those things that stand in your way, that sense that you are separate from one another, me and you are different, that those desires, anger, all of these things that begin to block us. But all of these are just temporary things. And the Masters came to be able to give us the techniques to refine ourselves at all different levels. Yogananda, when he came, he would often start. But I mentioned there's enough power in this gram of flesh to light up the city of Chicago. We have to begin by unlocking, physically just unlocking the physical power potential in each one of us. That energy that's within us, and then learning to be able to apply that. And then, more subtly, learning to become aware of that energy within ourselves. Becoming aware, beginning to withdraw that energy deep within ourselves, and then uplifting that energy up into the brain so that we can awaken that energy in the brain. And this is the science of Kriya Yoga. Learning to become aware of the movement of life force within the body, the power that is there for us to access, becoming aware of it. That awareness precedes control. You become aware of it, and then slowly you begin to withdraw, become aware of that energy within yourself, and then you begin to control that energy within yourself to the degree that you can uplift that energy up to the brain. And you find as you do that, you begin to access this superconscious health begins to come to you. You begin to intuitively begin to understand. And if you have some interest in this, of what your potential truly could be, I very much recommend that you practice some of these very simple techniques. It doesn't take a great deal of effort and time, but you can find that within a very short period of time, weeks, months, perhaps a little longer, you can become a different person. When I started, I was a very restless young college student. But putting myself under the instruction of Swamiji, within a year, I could hardly recognize myself. I became a very different person. And I think the same potential is there for each and every one of us. Practice something. Practice and aspire to something higher. Don't be satisfied with what we hear, that life seems to tell us that there's nothing more. There is something more. And it's there and available for each one of us if we aspire and if we apply ourselves to it. So we'd like to share today with you. I'm going to ask Nayaswami Jaya to come up, and she's going to share with you some very practical techniques. Now, as I mentioned also, you need to, we can only share just a little bit. This is the tip of the iceberg. But it doesn't take a great deal of effort. The most important step that you can take is the first one. Take that first step, and you'll see that very quickly you'll begin to feel a greater sense of joy, a greater sense of inspiration, and your intuition will begin to open up so that you begin to draw solutions to life's problems. Be solution conscious, and you'll see that your life will change.